Welcome back. NATO launching its Arctic Sentry mission in Greenland to expand Europe's military presence in Greenland. The President Trump is pushing to acquire the territory, of course. The president flagging the importance of Greenland, including the rare earth minerals there, as well as the plan to build part of America's new Golden Dome on the region, something he told me about last month. But Russia and China's influence in the region remains, and the president says that must be stopped. Vice President J.D. Vance discussed the state of negotiations from Armenia Tuesday. Watch.
Well, look, it's very early in the Greenland talks. I know that we've been working quite a bit on this over the last few weeks, but it's just very simple. Greenland is very important to the national security of the United States of America. I do think that some of our allies have underinvested in Arctic security, and if we're going to invest in Arctic security, if we're going to basically pay a lot of money and be on the hook for protecting this massive landmass, I think it's only reasonable for the United States to get some benefit out of that, and that's going to be the focus of the negotiations here over the next few months.
Joining me now is the former Danish Prime Minister and former NATO Secretary General, Anders Fogh Rasmussen. Anders, thanks very much for joining us this morning. What is your reaction to the president's plans for Greenland?
I share the concerns expressed by President Trump and Vice President Vance. We need a stronger defense of the Arctic region, including Greenland. We need to attract more private investment in mining and extraction of critical minerals. And we need to make sure that no Chinese or Russian investments will take place in critical sectors. So I share the concerns, and they can all be accommodated through negotiations and new deals and no attack on Greenland.
So how will you do that? I mean, when you say we have to protect the region, we have to ensure that we're not getting adversarial fire from perhaps China and Russia, what do you envision then? How would you do that?
I would suggest three deals. First, a new security or defense agreement between Denmark, Greenland, and the United States. The existing defense agreement dates back to 1951. So here in the 75th anniversary of this security agreement, we could update it and pave the way for a stronger military presence in Greenland. We can adopt an investment agreement with the aim to attract more private investment in mining and extraction of critical minerals, and we could declare that only investors from NATO countries, for instance, are allowed to invest in critical infrastructure in Greenland.
Yes, okay, I understand. And how do you feel about parts of the Golden Dome being on Greenland territory?
I find it natural. I mean, the United States has already today an air base, a missile. It's part of the missile defense. So that could easily be expanded to include the Golden Dome.
Yes. Meanwhile, Estonia's Foreign Intelligence Service is out with a new report, Mr. Prime Minister, and it warns that Russia is rebuilding its war machine for the long haul. Fox News Digital writes, quote, Estonian intelligence say that the Kremlin is compensating by shifting toward mass attrition, dramatically expanding weapons production, reorganizing its military around volume rather than quality, even as fighting in Ukraine continues. Anders, how do you see this? I mean, can Europe build up its defenses to fend off Russia?
I fully agree in that assessment, and obviously we can handle Russia. The size of the Russian economy is equivalent to Italy. That's all. So if we unite, I would say, if we shift gear in Europe and bring our economies on a war footing, obviously we can handle Russia, hopefully in a close cooperation with the United States.
And of course, we are now headed toward the Munich Security Council. The Munich Security Conference is beginning tomorrow. And a number of important Democrat and Republican senators and congressmen are going. Mr. Prime Minister, what would you like to see the conversation center on at this year's Munich Security Conference? What's most pressing from your standpoint?
I think the most pressing issue is to put more pressure on President Putin. Putin doesn't have any incentive to engage constructively in peace negotiations as long as he believes that he can win on the battlefield. We will have to change his calculus by putting more military pressure on Russia, by putting more economic pressure on Russia. I would encourage President Trump to use the same strategy towards Putin as he's now doing towards the Iranian regime, a combination of strong military pressure and diplomacy. That works in the Middle East, and obviously it would also work towards Putin.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons that the president has pushed NATO to increase defense spending, right? I mean, allies have committed to 5% of their GDP by 2035, and the president is arguing that America should no longer carry the burden of Europe's security on its own because of what you're just saying. Russia is on the march, and then there's China that is on the march, which we talk about every day. Anders.
But I think let's agree, Europe and the United States, to end the war in Ukraine as soon as possible so that we can focus on the real geopolitical global challenge, namely China. China is financing Russia, helping Russia, and Xi Jinping would conclude that if Putin can get away with taking Crimea, practically at any cost, then he can take Taiwan. I think it's important that the American people understand there is a clear link here between Ukraine and China.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Mr. Prime Minister, we so appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much for being here. Anders Fogh Rasmussen, we will talk with you soon, and we look forward to it.
Oh, Maria, for having me.
And tomorrow, join us for my special interview with General David Petraeus. He will be coming to us from the Munich Security Conference right here, live. We'll be right back.